Hey there, this is your host, Selena Robinson. You are listening to Journey to Gentle Podcast. I am a mama sharing my journey to be more compassionate, mindful, and supportive with myself, my kids, and others. Thank you for tuning in. Several of the clips in this podcast were recorded on my phone in the car, so the audio isn't that great, but I needed to share my thoughts right then and there. As my oldest child gets closer to starting school, I'm finding myself more and more afraid. I've been having an increasingly harder time dealing with my feelings, and when I heard the beginning of this podcast that I will mention, it dawned on me why I've been having a hard time. In this first part, I talk about losing the illusion of safety.
So, I'm on my way to the store and I'm sitting here listening to this podcast, Parenting for Liberation, episode 40. And she says, we're afraid to breathe deeply because we're afraid that it will release something that we might not be able to get back. And I think one of the reasons why this has been such a struggle for me is because, I've realized, what it is that I've lost. It's not a horrible loss, but I'm kind of, grieving that loss and trying to work through those feelings, but it was this illusion of safety that I had. In the podcast with my mom, we talk about how we've kind of lived in this bubble. And this bubble is pretty much the bubble of privilege, where we haven't had to deal with these issues. And now I am no longer in this bubble. I no longer want to be in the bubble. And taking myself out of this bubble, it takes away the illusion of safety that I've kind of been surrounding myself with for years. When I see in the media these black men and what's happening to them, like Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, I see my oldest child, my dark-skinned baby, and I see that he's not safe, and I see that I can't stay in this bubble, this illusion that I've kind of been living my life in, that I have to step out of it, and that we are not safe, and that he's not safe, and that something has to be done. And I think this is probably the first time that I've really cried over the topic. I'm always in a situation where I don't really feel like I can cry, nor do I understand what I'm crying for. But I think that's it. Safety isn't something that I could ever get back, because in this country, there is no safe places for my boys. And so now I am immersing myself in this information. Before, I would acknowledge what was happening and acknowledge the injustices, but I didn't really understand. There was a lot of information that I was missing. All I had was my school education and the media, and now I'm able to really see what's behind that. And it's more than just, oh look, there's no more racism, we're making progress. It's just all been hidden behind policies like the war on drugs, and hidden in things like the school to prison pipeline. And for centuries, we have been suffering all of these injustices, and I'm finally able to like really see what's going on. And I can't just sit back anymore and not do anything and to push it aside and to shove down my feelings and just live my life. I have to do something. And that something 100% starts with the way that I parent my kids. I speak about this in the podcast with my mom. We never really had like a sit-down conversation around race. She never really had a sit-down conversation around race with her parents. And I want to change that. I want so badly to change that. Not having these conversations for whatever reason we choose not to is what's keeping things the same. No matter what kind of home you live in, whether it be you're a person of color or you're a white person, not having these conversations and pretending like, not even pretending, but turning a blind eye to the injustices that are happening, not educating yourself on what's going on, not really listening to what's going on, not really hearing the people that are trying to speak out. That is what's keeping things the same. And I can't continue to perpetuate the system by not speaking about the system. From the system being the government to the systems within our household. Like, I have to speak out and I have to change. And so yeah, that's the first part of this. I'm going to clean myself up and go into the store, and then maybe I'll be able to come out and speak a bit more.
After my trip to the store, while in the car, I share my thoughts on kids having a voice and being taught how to think, not what to think. I'm still developing my thoughts and gathering information around the idea that kids are oppressed. So eventually I'll be able to talk about it a bit more articulately. This next quote comes from the beginning of the podcast, Fare of the Free Child, episode 172.
You can't keep using tools of oppression and expect to raise free people. I was listening to a podcast, and that is the quote I heard, and it spoke to me so much. This is exactly what I'm talking about and what I'm meaning, that the way that the traditional way of raising children, it is oppression. They are the epitome of being unheard, and people will like use the excuse, that their brains are not fully developed. It doesn't mean that they aren't capable of things, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be heard, and that the things that they think and feel shouldn't be taken into account. And it starts there. Like, everything starts there. Everything starts with the way that we parent our children. I'm pretty sure, like, often, like, the little meme goes around of, like, two little kids hugging, and they're both of different races, and it says, no one is born racist. And I agree. Absolutely no one is born racist. Our education, our socializing, that is where the racism comes from, or the lack of education could also very well be where that racism comes from, or at least the continual perpetuation of racism, of racist systems. And so it is important to look at the way we are raising our children, and whether or not we're listening to them and allowing their voice to be heard, whether or not we think they are wrong or right, they have a right to be listened to. It starts with hearing them and allowing them to be a part of that decision-making process. and being there for them when they make the wrong decisions without the shame and the blame. Like, this is where it starts. If we want to elicit change, we first have to change the way we are raising our children. They're the next generation. They're the ones who are going to be running the country in the future. And if we just continue to do the same thing with them, the same things will just continue to happen. And so everything that I will be doing on this podcast, on my blog, will be working to change those things. Everything. Because it needs to be changed. So whether it be talking about consequences or labeling our kids or like our mindset around their behaviors, like, change starts there. It does. And that is my goal. I can look back at my childhood and I can see how the way that I was raised and the things that I was taught or wasn't taught, I can see the effect that those have. And I'm looking to change that, and I hope that you are too. My 4-year-old has this amazing, amazing voice where he is already standing up for himself and things that he thinks are wrong, and he's already standing up for me, and it is so amazing. And I can easily see this voice of his getting squashed out at such a young age. And once his voice is gone, then what? Like, once he no longer feels that he has the space to speak because he's a child, because he's wrong, where is the learning taking place? If you're first off, like, telling your kids how to think, not even how to think, but what to think. If you are telling them what they should be thinking, what they should be doing, and you're never ever allowing them the opportunity to think for themselves, like, ever, and you're never allowing them the opportunity to be able to stand up for themselves and to stand up for others. We can work on I dislike the word perfecting, but I can't think of another word right now. So we can work on perfecting these skills within our kids. But if you just say, no, you're wrong, don't do that, you're squashing the little bit of voice that they do have. Like, why not really get in deep into it and see their view and why they think that what they're doing is right, and talk with them. And, you know, like, I can't even really fully get out what it is that I want to say, but it has to be said. And over these episodes, hopefully I will be able to better articulate what it is that I'm saying. But us parents, this is important work. And it's not something to just be pushed aside and saved for later. Especially not when it comes to the topic of racism. Whether it be protecting our kids from what's out there, or whether it be changing what's out there. There's this show that I was watching, All American, on Netflix. And the mixed race son, like, the father, grew up in a rough area. And mixed race son, the father never taught him about these things. He thought that with money and status and living in a nicer neighborhood, that he had bought his child time, more time. And his son found out the hard way about what's out there. He was pulled over by the cops, and he was pulled over by the cops and ended up handcuffed and face down on the cement. And that is where he got his education, because his father thought that he had bought him more time by simply, like, changing his location. And that is not true. We cannot choose when our children become educated on this topic. So we have to educate them ourselves. And in order to change the system, we also have to allow them to have a voice and to think critically and not just tell them what to think. At this point, I think I'm just repeating myself, so I'm going to pause this, stop, and think.
In this next piece, I talk about the importance of parenting and self-reflection as it relates to being anti-racism.
I will continue to mention this because I think it's very important. I'm learning, and this is my first time really speaking out and having a voice about this topic. If I say anything wrong, if I say anything that needs to be addressed, absolutely positively let me know. You can reach out to me on any of my social media platforms at Journey to Gentle. I absolutely positively, I want to learn. If you have resources, send them to me. It is so important for me to learn. I hate so much that my education was just this surface level thing, that I believe I mentioned this before, that, it was just, hey, look at all this progress, when really there's just so much injustice still happening. I want to learn. I want to be able to teach. And I need help to do that. There's quite a lot that I can teach myself, but I think that it is so important to be able to hear experiences from other people, which is why I did the podcast with my mom and my best friend. I want to hear those experiences. I want the information. I want to learn, and I hope those of you out there listening to this want to learn too. That is the start, is educating yourself, and then sitting with this information, sitting with what we're learning, and really evaluating our opinions, our biases around these things. It's one thing to just hear it, because you can hear it and you can push it aside. But you've really got to sit with this stuff. You've really got to think about what is going on. One of my biggest fears around this is, from what I've been seeing about, how you can help, is people just, sharing this and sharing that, maybe donating a little bit of money here, and then that's it. That's all. I did my piece. I'm bettering stuff. No, you've got to do more than that. It's more than just sharing a post. Great, share the information and get it out there. Donate the money. The money, it helps so much. But there's just so much more to be done. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so for changing the way that we raise our kids. Because that is huge. So many of us are parents, and we're not sure how we can raise the next generation to be a generation for change. And it starts with, first off, working on ourselves, and then changing the way that we parent. Without that, everything will just stay the same. So that's one thing you can do, more than just sharing a post here and sharing a post there. Look at yourself and reevaluate, yourself. Sit with your feelings and sit with your thoughts. These thoughts that you have, the biases, the stereotypes. Look at those things and look at where they come from. And how much information you actually have on them. Do you just have them because this is the way you were raised? This is what your parents told you? This is what you see in the media? How much information around these topics do you really have? How much have you heard from the people that are from these people that you're stereotyping? These people that you have your biases around? Or are you just taking someone else's opinion and calling it your own? What work are you actually doing on yourself? Yeah, that's all I got for now.
I've recently realized that I have privilege. I'm still working through that, and so you'll hear me mentioning it several times in these upcoming podcasts. Here I talk about what it means and what to do with it.
So part of this, looking at yourself and evaluating, your actions and what you're doing. A part of this is also, I'm sure you've heard before, checking your privilege. And it's huge. I've recently realized I, dark-skinned black woman, am in a position of privilege. And what the fuck am I doing with it? Not a goddamn thing. And it is bothering the mess out of me. First, realizing the privilege that I had and have had my whole life, the ability to live in that bubble, was hard. And now that I've accepted this privilege that I have, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to help others? And this is more than just about racism. It's
there are so many people who don't have many of the privileges that I have, like even just staying home with my kids, the financial security that I have right now. That in and of itself is a privilege. And how, like, what am I doing to change anything? What am I doing to help others? I'm honestly not doing much. And I want to be doing so much more. And I can be doing more. And I will be doing more. I am going to work towards something. I have to work towards something. I can't just sit here and put a bubble up around me and my kids and be like, we're good, y'all are on your own. No, that's not going to change anything. It's not going to make anything better. And I can't just sit here and watch the world burn and not give it a try. So, do you have privilege? And if you do, what the heck are you doing with it? What are you doing? Thank you all for tuning in and joining me on this journey. Next week, we will finish up the conversation with my mom, where we discuss our lack of education on race and racism. Until then, bye.